Delays if you're flying this weekend. Winter weather likely won't be the only obstacle for you. New regulations starting tomorrow will require more rest for airline pilots and restrict how much time they can spend in the sky. Some airlines have gone on hiring sprees to avoid and mitigate delays, but guess who will end up footing the bill for all those new pilots? I bet you can guess. Here now is travel expert Lee Abbamonte. Thanks so much for joining us. I heard this described as the biggest change to pilot regulation in aviation history. Isn't that crazy?
It's a pretty dramatic explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty big step. I mean, considering, they're trying to, increase safety, obviously,
right.
But at the same time, it's probably going to cause a lot more delays. So there's been a lot of controversy around it.
A lot of airlines are taking steps in order to sort of mitigate this. United hiring 60 to 100 pilots. I know Virgin Airways was hiring 600 pilots. Will that help with the delays, and what does that cost?
Well, obviously they got to pay the salaries of the pilots, which is going to be an increase in cost. But at the same time, they have to watch their hours. So they lower the amount of hours that pilots can work. So when they've reached a certain amount of hours, they have to have substitute pilots available to come in.
And do they? They have substitute pilots standing by, ready to go in? I mean, that sounds like one of those things that's great in theory, but then when they call it, no one's answering.
Well, that's kind of the whole controversy. No one actually knows how it's going to go in theory. So, in practice, but in theory, it's a great idea. But it's that's where it's going to suffer. Cities like Boise, Idaho, or something like that, where it's not like a hub city where they just have a bunch of people hanging out. So they're going to have to, fix that. But at the same time, if you're in Newark or in Houston or Chicago, where it's a hub city, they'll have pilots standing by.
We asked you to come on because you're an expert traveler. You've been to every country in the whole entire world, which I didn't believe, but I quizzed you on it during the commercials. So clearly it's true. What would you do in response to this? Because one of the things I heard during the day today was, by the end of the day, a lot of pilots, if they're delayed, will have to time out. So it made me feel like, well, I was looking at flights today. I'm like, I don't want to buy that 7 o'clock flight because that's the one that's most likely having to be canceled because they can't find a pilot. Is that logical, or what would you do personally to try and deal with this?
They actually lowered the amount of hours at night that pilots can fly, even more than they did during the day. So if a flight is going to get canceled, it's more than likely going to be a late at night, early morning flight as opposed to during the day. So in order to avoid delays, I would definitely suggest flying during the day if you can.
And then aren't more people going to do that? So the price of those flights go up and get more crowded?
That is definitely a possibility. It's going to be really interesting to see how this works out because there's a lot of changes here. No one actually knows how they're going to play out.
Is it? Of course I want my pilot to be well rested.
Right.
But I heard somebody else making the point, we really don't have very many crashes and accidents. Was this necessary in your opinion? What do you think?
Well, this is all in response to a crash back in 2009.
In 2009, one in Buffalo.
Right.
You're changing everything because of that?
Yeah, it was blamed on pilots being overworked and not enough rest and being too tired. And a lot of these pilots, they fly back-to-back days. They'll do 8 hours, back-to-back. So that's tough. Think about if you have to wake up at 4 in the morning to go to the airport, you're exhausted, right? But you go right to sleep, but they have to be on their game, and obviously they're in charge of hundreds of people.
I guess, in my business, a lot of people get up I have in the past, you get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, you come in, you do a 3-hour show, you stay and do something else. For a lot of people, it is the job that you accept. Maybe it's you have a lot of caffeine. Maybe you have the type of constitution where you can deal with that. I don't know. It does seem like we've been doing it safely. I don't know that a lot of people think the dramatic changes were necessary.
I do agree with you. I think it's a bit dramatic, but I am kind of curious to see how it's going to play out. But it's nice to see the government at least actually doing something. So
I don't like them doing anything. But Lee, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time.
Sure.
Coming up is Obamacare.